Next, we have a 2018 question. The 2018 question is, which one of the following best describes carbon fertilization? Carbon fertilization, when you look at it, they've given, again, it's very similar to what I just told you. So, fertilize means what? You are somehow increasing something. Here you are saying carbon fertilization. So, what exactly are we looking at over here? So, you are looking at some process where either carbon is increased or carbon is doing the increase of something. So, something to do with the increase of the growth or something, or the increase of carbon. So, this is what we are looking at. Let's read the options. First option reads as to increased plant growth due to increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Increased temperature of earth due to increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We know that has another word and it is called as your global warming. So, that's not your answer. So, now when it comes to this particular third option, it is increased acidity of oceans as a result of increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. See, now this is something that is already happening. So, why would you, this is a process wherein what happens is you have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and the carbon dioxide has to get dissolved into the water. That when it gets dissolved, it does create something called as your carbonic acid. But the problem over here is when the temperature, because of the excess of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, what happens is you don't have, or when you have the general temperature increase, what happens is the gases find it really difficult to dissolve in water. So, ideally it should have maybe made carbonic acid, but what is happening is because of excess of carbon dioxide, the entire area is getting warm, and because of the increase in temperature, the carbon dioxide is not able to dissolve in the water. So, this is your wrong option. Finally, adaptation of all living beings on earth to the climate change brought about by the increased concentration of carbon dioxide. The very problem of climate change is the fact that not all living organisms can quickly adapt to these circumstances. So, they will get extinct, and that is something that is, so that makes a last option absolutely wrong. So, primarily carbon fertilization means increase in plant growth due to increase in your concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which means what? When you have more amount of carbon dioxide, this carbon dioxide increases the rate of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process by which plants prepare food. When the rate of photosynthesis is increased, what again happens is you have your plants growing quickly, and that leads to more plants growing. When more plants grow, again that leads to more carbon dioxide getting captured by it. So, this is actually a good term and good process, and the answer to this question is increased plant growth due to increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We have a question from 2018. The question reads as, which of the following is or are the possible consequences of heavy sand mining in riverbeds? So, when it comes to sand mining, understand what happens is you have a certain river, and in the river you have a river bed. You are basically taking the sand from this riverbed area. Okay. Lowering of the water table, pollution of groundwater, decreased salinity in the river. See, when it comes to your sand mining, what happens is you are changing basically the area of flow of the water. Okay, so there is river water that has this much of space to flow right now. When you are taking the sand from here, you're changing the water table. That is the first thing. First thing happens is the lowering of the water table. When the water table gets lowered, what happens is to compensate for that, water from maybe nearby seas or nearby areas will start flowing into the water body. So, what happens? Here the salinity actually increases and not decreases. So, your first option is wrong. Your third option is correct. So, if your first option is wrong, it gives you the answer which is 2 and 3. Because when you lower the water table and when you're taking up the sand from this, what also happens is the sand actually is not just to create that beautiful structure. The idea is this: when you have water, it passes through the sand, there is a layer of filtration of that water that happens with the sand, and then is where it seeps to the underneath. If you remove the sand, that layer of filtration will not happen. All the impurities will reach to the groundwater. So here 2 and 3 will happen. The answer to your question is B, 2 and 3 only. A 2017 question, the 2017 question primarily reads as, biological oxygen demand is a standard criterion for measuring oxygen levels in blood, computing oxygen levels in forest ecosystems, pollution assay in aquatic ecosystems, assessing oxygen levels in high altitude regions. See, from the term itself, it's something related to oxygen is obvious to us. It's just that where is it used? Okay. Now, the answer to this question is C, but I'll tell you what is the background of it. When it comes to your water bodies, what happens is, in a normal scale itself, you have living organisms over there. You have your plants, you have certain animals dependent on the plants, then you have microscopic organisms. Why do you need them? You need the microscopic organisms because when your plant or an animal dies in the aquatic ecosystem, they need to be decomposed. Okay, so this is a very standard process. It happens in any aquatic ecosystem. Now, the problem is, when you have your decomposers, the decomposers can be aerobic in nature or anaerobic in nature. Aerobic or anaerobic primarily is a differentiation based on the oxygen needed by the microorganisms to decompose. For example, aerobic organisms need oxygen for decomposition. Anaerobic don't need oxygen. Okay, anaerobic are a little bit slower in comparison to aerobic. Aerobic they are quick, efficient, because they can easily do the decomposition when it comes to the presence of oxygen. Okay. Again, that is also standard. Things start changing when the lake gets polluted. When the lake gets polluted, what happens is a process called as artificial eutrophication. Artificial eutrophication primarily means that somehow there is so much of organic material coming to the water body. There is some kind of chemicals coming, and that chemicals might be aiding. For example, if there is a field nearby and there is so much of fertilizer runoff that is coming from there, the fertilizer reaches the water body, and here whichever plant is growing, they also get fertilized. So now ideally there should have been a minimal plant growth, but here there are so much increase in your growth, so much so that whatever earlier, whatever organic matter was there in the form of your plant, animal, microorganisms, all of their populations start increasing. Why? Because plants start growing abundantly. Dependent on the plant extensive growth, what's going to happen? Animals start growing. At one point, they would start dying, and when they start dying, you need microorganisms that are growing over there to decompose it. At this point, and earlier also, there is a certain oxygen demand that the microorganism needs to decompose. Now, earlier if it was just less, now when the lake gets polluted, what happens? The microorganisms are like, no, we need more and more oxygen for this much body of organic matter to get decomposed. Which means that in a highly polluted lake, the biological oxygen demand, the demand in the sense that the oxygen required by the microorganisms is going to be much, much higher. Unfortunately, when you study pollution, you will understand the demand is very high, but they don't actually get that much of oxygen. That is a separate story altogether. But the demand is very high. So, if you measure the biological oxygen demand in an ecosystem, you will be able to know how polluted the water body is. So, the answer to the question is C. It is the pollution assay of your aquatic ecosystems. The next question is a 2017 question. The question reads as, in the context of solving pollution problems, what is or are the advantage of bioremediation technique? Bioremediation primarily means that you are using biological organisms like your algae, fungi, bacteria, etc., which can very easily eat up any kind of impurities and convert it into a simpler form. Okay. Now, sometimes these organisms are naturally found. Sometimes these organisms can be created by genetic modification also. Let's look into the options. First statement reads as, it's a technique for cleaning up pollution by enhancing the same biodegradation process that occurs in nature. Any contaminant with heavy metals such as cadmium and lead can be readily and completely treated by bioremediation using microorganisms. Genetic engineering can be used to create microorganisms specifically designed for bioremediation. The third statement I have already mentioned to you. Yes, looking at certain organisms, you can create the same kind of what you say, bacteria. So, for example, if you have a certain bacteria that is available having certain properties in your land, you can look at what is the genetic compound of it and maybe genetically modify another bacteria or another fungi or something by incorporating that genetic content. So, yes, they can maybe genetically engineered. First statement is exactly what I said as bioremediation. Normally itself bacteria and fungi and all would be doing this degradation process. Here what happens is you are putting them in a large quantity, you are maybe putting them with certain other sources also, so that maybe some kind of a catalyst like oxygen or something. So what happens is they will start doing their process in a quicker manner. So that statement is also correct. The problem with the second statement is, see, yes, there are certain microorganisms that can maybe break down cadmium or lead or anything, but the question reads as, or the statement reads as, it can be completely treated and readily and fully treated by your microorganisms. And the problem is there. Why? Because it is very rarely seen where you have these microorganisms that can completely break it down into a simpler thing. This is the reason why the second statement is not correct over here. The answer for this is 1 and 3, because statement 1 and statement 3 are correct. The second statement, because it's not that you have certain microorganisms that grow in this toxic environment and everything, but the breaking down of it completely is a questionable thing.